Hello everyone, this is LVarn and I'd like to tell you about my capstone project. I chose to do a performance improvement project for my current employer, Volunteers of America, Ohio and Indiana, that focuses on supervisor learning needs and performance improvement. Volunteers of America, Ohio and Indiana is a multi-state nonprofit faith-based organization with over 1,000 employees, helping more than 23,000 people across the region. Our mission is to transform lives and help people reach their full potential by offering hope and restoring dignity. Many know us for our thrift stores and auto auctions, but the real mission-driven work happens at our programs that serve veterans, individuals and families experiencing homelessness, those re-entering our communities from incarceration, and other vulnerable populations. This project represents the first steps towards conducting a learning needs analysis and development of an annual organizational learning plan. Supervisors were chosen as the target audience due to their significant impact on the agency and the belief that there were significant knowledge and skill gaps for supervisors. The agency was seeking to identify and prioritize the performance gaps for supervisor level staff and to develop a plan to address the top performance gaps with appropriate interventions. The intention was to use recommendations to inform the annual organizational learning plan. In addition to myself, there were 5 other members of the project team. My direct supervisor, the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Compliance, was the project sponsor. The Executive Vice President of Human Resources also agreed to be part of the team. The remaining 3 members work in the Strategy and Compliance department with me. The project was designed using the Human Performance Technology model for change management. This is the model that we use in the 620 and 660 courses. As you know, the model calls for a full analysis of the organization and work environment to determine and define performance gaps. Using this model, I first conducted a full gap analysis, then used information, opinions, and data gathered to identify and define those performance gaps. Next, I used the analysis data to pinpoint the causes for each gap. Once causes were identified, appropriate interventions were selected. Finally, I created a performance improvement project plan. The project team gave input into the project plan and assisted with activities in the cause analysis. They also gave input in the selection of interventions to address the gaps. The most valuable sources for the analysis were supervisor and director surveys that I designed and deployed using Google Forms. Surveys focused on supervisor performance, learning needs, and other supports needed for high performance. After the surveys, supervisors, directors, and executive staff were interviewed to help us better understand some of the feedback in the surveys. HR also provided turnover data from our HRIS system, and I was lucky enough to review some internal documents, including a draft of the 3-year strategic plan. Zoom was an important tool that I used to keep the project team engaged since we were all working from home. I used Gilbert's behavior engineering model to synthesize data and identify the causes for each gap. The first gap we identified was program staff turnover rates, which are above industry average. It's important to note that a majority of staff who left also did so voluntarily. In 2019, turnover rates for Volunteers of America program staff was 43.5%. This is well above industry averages of between 19 and 23%. That's where we want to be. Causes that we identified were individual knowledge, skills, and abilities of supervisors, and this gap was given a high priority. The second gap identified was mastery of role. Half of all supervisors surveyed did not feel that they had mastered their roles. This is true even for those who had 2 or more years of experience. The desire is for 80% of supervisors who have been in their current role for 2 or more years to report that they had mastered their role on follow-up surveys. Identified causes for this gap are rooted in both the environment and individual, including inadequate expectations and feedback, lack of incentives or motivating practices, and lack of knowledge, skills, and abilities for both supervisors and mid-managers. This gap was assigned a high priority. The third and final gap was supervisor financial competencies. 21% of mid-managers rated supervisor financial competency at a 4 or 5 on a 5-point scale. The desire is for 58% of them to rate supervisor financial competencies at a 4 or 5 on follow-up surveys. There were both environmental and individual causes for the low performance on financial competencies. Issues with knowledge and skills as well as tools and resources contributed to this gap, which was given a moderate priority. A variety of interventions were recommended. Many of them are learning interventions or staff development interventions. The agency already had a bias towards these types of interventions since the project included a draft of the organizational learning plan. However, other recommendations include assessments of the agency's retention and motivating practices, creating performance support tools or job aids, and improving individual growth interventions for supervisors, such as performance assessments, feedback, and other practices that the agency can use to support supervisors' individual performance improvement. I developed and proposed a 22-month plan for implementing the recommended interventions using the model you see here. If accepted, the success of the plan will hinge on it being a collaborative effort, including stakeholders across the agency, especially supervisors, directors, managers, as well as other staff from administrative departments. The goals of the Performance Improvement Project are directly connected with the 3 performance gaps that we identified, including reducing program staff turnover rates, increasing supervisor mastery of role, and increasing supervisor financial competencies. It is a pretty ambitious plan that calls for 22 months of activities with 17 project team members, 8 deliverables, 10 milestones, and 46 identified activities. Just looking at the plan seems a little daunting to me, but with a lot of support and collaboration, I think we can make it happen. As far as outcomes for the initial project objectives, I was able to identify and prioritize gaps and ultimately create a performance improvement plan. I also submitted a draft of the organizational learning plan, which I'll continue to develop over the next few months. I was able to keep the project team engaged in the process, and there seems to be an interest in the project at the executive level. I presented the project to the project team and other stakeholders, and everyone seemed to agree that we were on the right track and they were supportive of the project moving forward. In fact, some stakeholders have already agreed to be a part of it, if we're given approval to implement it, that is. As far as obstacles, COVID-19 was the biggest issue I ran into with this project. 2 of my project team members were furloughed, which reduced the amount and type of support I had for the project, including one individual who was a major collaborator for me and who had provided some of the most detailed feedback and ideas. Attention and participation in the project decreased as the agency mobilized everyone to react to COVID-19, making this project a lower priority until about week 9. Other obstacles. I had been trying to move forward with the project using the HPT model we used throughout the program, but it didn't quite seem to fit with the actual expectations and rubric. Later in the project, I did some more research and found the Rumler and Brock 9 boxes model and their 14-step performance their 14-step performance improvement process. Rumler and Brock focus on the 3 levels of performance. These seem to align more with what was expected in this project, but I did not remember learning about them or using them during the program. Overall, the project went well. Although the extensions for the capstone assignments were needed, I was able to deliver all the agreed upon items. I'm excited at the prospect of presenting the Performance Improvement Project plan to the executive team, and I'm hopeful that the project will move forward. To improve these types of projects in the future, I'm going to try to have a more well-rounded team with folks who have time and commitment to do their part of the project. In fact, the performance improvement plan that I put together calls for a larger team with staff from multiple levels and departments. I think as I do more projects like this, I'll be better at deciding what resources are needed and having more realistic timelines. I'm also going to try to learn more about Rumler and Brock's 9 boxes model. Please check out these resources if you are interested in learning more, and thank you so much for your time. I wish you all the best.